I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 1 of the Relentless Pursuit podcast. Thank you, and I love you. So it's been about 6 weeks since our last episode of Season 4 aired. We were celebrating 50 episodes. We were closing out the summer. I think that aired on August 25th, so we had probably recorded it a week or two before that. Yeah. And we had a nice little break. And, you know, May and September are always very busy months for us, so it's nice to be able to kind of like know that we can have a break from creating content and recording. And even though this is fun and exciting for us, like just like all things, we like breaks and like to do things in cycles. And so
it's nice to be back as well and to kick off Season 5.
Yeah, doing things a little different. All 4 kids are at school right now. We're batch recording a bunch of episodes, and we're looking forward to what's coming up in Season 5.
Yeah, so we just wanted to throw out a request. Anyone who's listening who has enjoyed the content that we've been sharing and been getting a lot out of the conversations, if you go ahead and make your way to iTunes and leave a review for us, we would love to hear from you. And also share any episodes from the first 4 seasons that you found beneficial.
Yeah, share them with your friends. There's that little button. You can share it straight through a text.
All right, so full disclosure, this episode will be kind of heavy. Because what we're going to be talking about is a very significant event that happened in our life. On September 10th, my mother passed away. And the title of today's episode, Thank You and I Love You, were some of the last words that I had a chance to share with her. And so we'll talk about those words as well as just what our experience was like and some of the things that we've been reflecting on and learning through that process.
And don't do what we just did and start a podcast and not grab Kleenex for this. I don't know where it's going to go or what we're going to talk about, but we probably should have grabbed some Kleenex.
Yeah. So, this is our first parent to pass away. And I think we'll start just by sharing with you the story of what happened, what our experience was like, and then do our best to maybe articulate some of our feelings and lessons that we've learned. What was interesting was at the start of Season 4, that episode focused on writing our own eulogy. At the time, I did not imagine that I would be literally in the process of writing a eulogy for my own mother. But this kind of got us thinking as well, like while we're thinking about we're thinking about our own death and thinking about what kind of legacy we want to leave. One of the things that struck us was that we will likely encounter the loss of loved ones in our lifetime. And so thinking about not just our own end, but also thinking about the point where we do lose someone else is also something significant to think about. And it seems a little bit morbid, but not just thinking about our own end, but thinking about others' ends as well, and realizing that there is a terminus to many of the most important relationships in our lives.
And, you know, they say that that life is a series of goodbyes. You know, people are in and out of your life. And but for us, I feel like with this, you know, you don't imagine losing a parent when you're 30-something years old. You know, you think you're going to be like 50 and you're going to lose your 70 or 80-year-old parent. And so, you know, while you know this day is coming, and for us, we kind of knew from 11 and a half years ago that this day would come, that nothing is promised and nothing is guaranteed. I feel like you always think your parents are going to be there with you, and whether that's good or bad, right? You think they're always going to be there, and then they're suddenly not. Yeah. And so there's a shift that happens.
Yeah, and that's one of the surprising things that we've realized too, is that you recognize that just kind of the way things are today is the way things that they're always going to be, but that's not the case, and we've confronted that reality. So let's just tell a little bit about like just our experience and the story, I suppose. And I'll start, but like you mentioned, 11 and a half years ago. So those of you who don't know, my mom was diagnosed with cancer, actually back when I was a kid. And then she beat it and was in remission for decades. But then 11 and a half years ago, she was re-diagnosed with cancer as well. And she we kind of knew from that moment that at some point, the cancer would win. And we didn't know. In fact, the first diagnosis I think it gave her months. And we were like, what? And at the time, she didn't have any grandchildren. Now she has 10, including our 4. So we're very grateful for the decade plus that she was able to spend as a grandma and get to know our kids. But then I would say like this summer was when we began witnessing the most significant decline.
Yeah. So it was breast cancer when she was in her mid to late 30s. You were just in junior high. She had a mastectomy, was cleared, good to go, nothing
The chemo, yeah.
for years and years. Yeah, chemo, radiation. She had lost all of her hair. People were bringing you guys meals. Like it was a big thing. I know at the time your parents kind of kept it kind of quiet to not scare you.
They kept it kid friendly. Yeah.
Kid friendly. And then we were actually living with your parents at the time, just briefly in between selling a house and buying a house. And your mom had this terrible cough, and we kind of guilted her into going to the doctor. Mm-hmm. And I remember you had said, and you're not a very aggressive or like a draw the line kind of person, but you said you should go to the doctor because, I mean, what if it's something really, really bad? Like it seems like it's nothing, but what if your cancer is back? And, kind of saying it flippantly, and then come to find out like a couple months later, that was the case.
Right.
So that the cancer had metastasized, and it was really everywhere. It was like in her lymph nodes, in her bones, in her lungs. Like they always said that anything moving forward would be just to keep it at bay. It would never get rid of what was there. And that when she got a better diagnosis of experimental treatments and hormone therapy and drug therapy, that she could live with this for a while, or she could get hit by a bus. Like the odds were it's like 50-50. So I was pregnant with Jack at the time, and it was before she would ever be a grandma, and her fear was that she wouldn't live to see that day, and she lived 11 and a half years to see 10 grandkids being born. So we kind of always knew it would come. And year after year that she was still alive and still that same person that she had always been, mm-hmm. Full of zest and vigor and not letting people dictate who she was.
She wasn't really held back, and many times she was sick or uncomfortable or just weird side effects from some of the treatments she was on. But overall, she was okay.
Yeah. But things changed in July. Mm-hmm. We were out in Texas to see her. She had just started chemo and radiation, which she had told us at one point that would always be the last.
When there's nothing else to do, that's when she would go back on chemo. That was kind of our cue this summer that things had not been going well. She kept us updated with scans and doctor's visits. So this summer was like the first very serious indication that her health was very rapidly declining. But then, summer passed, and we took advantage of the time that we were able to visit and to spend. And then, really, we were planning on my parents coming to visit here on the weekend of September 11th. They would hang out with us and the kids and visit all their friends in Chicago. And it was really only the week before. So September 4th, that Saturday, was the day we decided that my mom was sick enough that she could not travel. And that felt weird to tell her, like, no, you can't travel. We'll come to you.
And if you know her, like you don't tell her what to do. She tells you what to do. So we kind of spoke up, and I remember telling her dad, I said, she doesn't get to be in charge anymore. We're currently in charge. She's too sick to travel. And even at that point, she said, I'm coming home. This is my last chance. Yeah. And then it kind of just escalated from there.
Yeah, so her last 2 weeks, there was significant decline. So leading up to September 4th, we had noticed that she could really hardly move around anymore without a lot of assistance. That's when we decided to go visit. And then we bought tickets to go, really, like we were planning to spend like the weekend down there. So we were going to arrive
Thursday night
and then leave Sunday night. But then just day by day, I would say like the struggle compounded, so that by Wednesday morning, it was bad enough after talking to my dad and just understanding her condition that we just dropped everything, changed our flight from Thursday night to Wednesday evening so that we could kind of rush down there. I left work, we picked up the kids from school early, made our way to the airport, and got down to Texas as fast as we could. Which, by the way, that was the first time we'd flown down to Texas instead of driving. Flying's a lot faster. Who would have thought?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We usually drive 1,000 miles overnight, 15 hours with the kids and the stuff. And we literally just, I mean, a bunch of carry-ons and we got the heck out of here. Dropped off the dog with my parents. Like, just, we're not coming to work. We're not, I handed off my business to my assistant. Like, just, there was just something about what was happening that compelled us to leave. I called him at work and I said, I think we have to go. I already found flights. I've already changed them. And we were like kind of talking on the phone while he was at work, like, is this the right thing? And I said, you know what? It could be, it could make all the difference.
But you kind of have a feeling too, like we both had that same feeling where like this was just it. If we would like to interact with her, if we would like to like just see her one more time, then you have to go now.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that we just understood that was the case. Like there's really no proof. Like you have no idea like what the future may hold. Right. Even at the time we're like, this may be our last chance to interact with her. She may persist in this condition for like you have no idea.
Right.
But we both had that feeling.
Well, and it was the conversation of, it doesn't matter how much money it costs to change our flight because we didn't get, trip insurance. It doesn't matter if we're pulling the kids out of school. It doesn't matter if he's not going to be at work. It doesn't matter if I miss something. Like life is so short and finite, and we forget that amongst our plans and everything else. It's like, I'd rather spend money on this than something else.
Yeah, it didn't matter. And so, yeah, we had the kids with us and took them on that flight down. And I remember feeling like I couldn't get there fast enough. So even like the ride from the airport to my parents' house was about half an hour. And I just remember like looking at the clock thinking, okay, like, 20 more minutes until I can see my mom, 15 more minutes until I can see my mom. And once we pulled up to the house, I pretty much rushed inside and she was asleep. My dad, this was probably maybe 8:30 at night. My dad woke her up in bed and she was so happy to see us, so relieved to see us, I think. She was woken up and my dad's like, Jordan's here. And like it's hard to see someone you love who looks normal all the time to suddenly like look very seriously ill, skeletal, emaciated. Those are the words that come to mind. And I just like pretty much burst into tears as soon as I saw her, just out of sadness and out of relief. And then she had hardly any strength, but she hugged each one of us. And then that's where like the words from the title of the episode came up, because, at a certain point, there's not a lot left to say except thank you for a great life. And I love you. So we shared a lot more than that, of course, but that's what it all boiled down to. She was so relieved to see the grandkids, and at some point she's like, okay, that's enough. Then she went back to sleep. So that was Wednesday night. Thursday was the last day that she was coherent. She was sleeping a great deal, but could still wake up, and we could speak with her and interact with her intermittently.
Laugh, hold her hand. I mean, she even had the energy to roll her eyes at your sister and some goofy story that would have, normally really just pissed her off. But just, she was still there, and she was still your mom. She was still my mother-in-law. She was still a grandma, enjoying the sounds of the kids in the background. And,
Yeah, there was oddly like a lot of laughter too, right? Because we're sitting around and it's hard to just be like morose all the time, especially when we're with each other and we can like tell stories and still make jokes. And it felt like a lot of normal family interaction, even with my mom, kind of sickly there in the bed.
But I think that's what it is. That's what life is. That's what family is. On Thursday, your dad was a little hesitant, like, oh, we should give her some time to rest. And I felt the opposite. I was like, she's going into the big rest. Like, this is not a time to close the door and stay away. It's like, at that point, I climbed on the bed and sat next to her and was holding her hand. And like the kids started to do that. And it's like, whether it's the end or whatever it is, it's time to lean in. It's time to hold on. It's time to laugh. Like, we're going to lose her. She's slipping away. But like, staying back and not saying anything or trying to say the right thing. It's not about that anymore. It's just about it's being there. Our presence was known, it was felt, the warmth, the joy, the shrieking of the kids, the pictures our kids were drawing and bringing into her. Like that was the most important thing.
Yeah. And she would still like make faces like, oh, she's like, oh, wow, you drew that. And, still kind of interact with her grandkids. So there were like, yeah, like, and like I said, like there's really just those last few things to say, thank you for everything. And I think we just kept repeating, I love you. And she would say it back. And, at a certain point, then you add goodbye to that too.
Yeah. I mean, on Wednesday morning, I had actually sent a text and I had sent it to your dad and I asked your dad to read it to your mom because there was a lot, like, okay, it's the end. Like, what do you want to say to somebody? And really there aren't enough words to say what you need to say. But I had sent something, her friends and her family were sending text to your dad and they were reading it to her because there was this sense of like, when there's this finality, like no one wants to like let that happen without telling someone that they're loved, that they're appreciated, what they learned from them, what they meant to them. And I was so nervous that we weren't going to get there in time. I wanted her to know, certain things like about how I felt about her and, like how I would help take care of your dad. And, I wanted her to feel like at peace because at some point we all had to say goodbye and we all had to tell her that it was okay to go because she was a fighter and she wasn't going to let go easily. Even though she believed that what was waiting on the other side was better than what was here, she was clinging to her family. She was telling people that she wasn't ready to go.
Right.
She had been in her mind knowing for 11 and a half years that it was coming and she still wasn't ready. And neither were we.
No one is. And that's what I think too. It doesn't matter how old we get or how old your parents get or any loved one. Like it's just, you're never ready to say goodbye. But I was glad we were there because we obviously we're sleeping there at my parents' house. And then Thursday, like we said, was her last coherent day. And then it was the middle of the night, 2 in the morning, when my dad woke me up. And that's always a little like nerve-wracking. And he was frazzled. He's like, look, she's asking for morphine. I don't know what to do. And he legit didn't. Like he was just like
panicked, shocked, overwhelmed. Yeah.
So I'm very glad that we were there, and I'm like, okay, I do know what to do because we had spoken with the hospice nurse. The medicine had been delivered that evening, and I'd gone through everything. So I wanted to be ready to support him. So we were able to just walk through that process, give my mom what she was requesting, but also that was kind of the
beginning of the end.
Yeah, there was a lot of steps along the way, and this was, one of those next steps where it was like, this is very imminent now. So it was the middle of the night, tried to give her some morphine, share her last few words with her, and then by 3:15 in the morning, she had fallen asleep, and then she wouldn't open her eyes up again after that. Then she was sleeping, maybe it's not the right word, but she was asleep all day Friday. And we were still gathering in the room, still speaking to her and gathering around her. And then once the whole day had settled down and everyone had, there was a lot of relatives coming in and out to visit throughout the day. And then finally it was 10:19 p.m. on Friday, September 10th, that she stopped breathing and her pulse stopped. And
we said goodbye.
And then in the room it was me, you, and my dad. And that was obviously painful, probably the hardest I've cried before. But at the same time, being together, like with one another too, was very helpful. I can imagine if any one of us were alone in that moment, right?
Or your dad, being in the house by himself
alone,
and
right.
not knowing what needed to happen. But we had already, because we had discussed it with the hospice care, and we knew what calls had to be made and or it was like when you lose your person, right? Mm-hmm. Where's your head? Your head is just everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. There's so much grief that it was
like grounding one another just a little bit more, to grieve together. I think is very significant it's very significantly different than grieving alone. So I was grateful that you and my dad and me could all be there, just around her body at the time of passing. So that made for another long night as well. So yeah, and after that was the grieving, the talking to the kids, and making arrangements, supporting my dad, and so on.
Yeah, a house full of visitors and still trying to let everyone kind of grieve and process, but also feed people, because you know that there's like two things you can do. You can cry and you can eat. And so, you know,
Yeah.
just...
Yes, our kids discovered comfort food.
Yeah. I mean, it was Wednesday night. I came home. I got home at Sunday night at midnight with the 4 kids alone. You came home about midnight, Monday night by yourself. And it was just this, it was a lot.
It's like
for a
an
lot of different
emotional
reasons.
whirlwind. Yeah.
Yeah. And then even just coming home and not necessarily being in that, but coming off of that, I felt like was even harder. Like it was easier to be together, and to go through it and to like, okay, we have to do this. It's this, it's that, it's this. And then you come home and you're just sitting with the weight of everything. And even that was, I feel like that was even harder.
Yeah. All right. So that's what happened. Of course, there's more details and things. I guess that's a part of that experience, but that's the gist. And ever since then, a lot of people ask like, how are you doing, or what do you need? And I think we've learned a few things along the way as well. So I guess the first thing is just about articulating feelings. Sometimes someone asks me how I'm doing, and then I tell them, and then
and he tells them, fine.
Well, that's not what I say, but then they'll pull Rosanna aside and ask, how's he really doing? And, that's that. I think it's hard to say what you're feeling, right? Because you're still alive. Like there's still kind of the day-to-day functionality that you go through, but there's also like, I would say like a weight or a shadow that kind of glooms over everything that you're doing. And at times you may not notice it. You may not be thinking of it. Like when I'm at work, I'm working. Like my mind is just on work mode, and it's not like I'm walking around with my shoulders hunched and I'm somber 100% of the time. But then there are other times where that's very much how I feel, because there's been some moment or some trigger, or just something that has drawn my mind back into that missing piece. It's like when you're a kid and you lose a tooth and you can't help but like put your tongue,
rub your tongue in the hole.
In the hole, yeah. There's a lot of that goes into it too. So, but we've, I think, been really good with one another and with friends and family, just trying to be honest with, here's what I am thinking or feeling at this moment.
Or here I am crying again over something that seems very inconsequential, but is, like you said, it's a missing piece. And I don't know if this is fortunate or unfortunate. Your parents moved to Texas about 2 years ago. And that was a hard time for us because they had always been like a mile away from us. Very much a part of our daily lives, our routines, right? Showing up at baseball and soccer and, picking up the kids from school on a certain day, and spending time with them, or family dinners. And in an odd way, we've actually been grieving the loss of your parents, your dad who is still alive, now your mom who is actually gone, for the last 2 years, because there was a huge shift in their role and presence in our life. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know if that was, a part of your mom's master plan or whatnot, but I feel like that kind of prepared us a little bit for this, where...
Right, there's a built-in distance.
Correct.
And so someone transitioning from being a part of your like day-to-day communication and routine to now kind of limited to certain visits or certain phone calls.
Right. And I'm not saying it's made it necessarily super easy or much easier, but I don't know if I'm thankful for that or not, but it's, it's made it, I think it's made it a little easier on us and the kids, but not easy.
So I wanted to say a word about like just what a lot of people wonder. I've wondered this, like what do you say to a person who is grieving? Because there's really nothing you can say, right? I have appreciated so much some of the random text messages, or we've gotten a lot of cards, or even just in person, like a hug and an I'm sorry. that's really all you can say. There's a whole bunch of like just generic phrases that are said around this time, like may you be blessed by her memory, may her memory be eternal with you. We're here to support you with anything that you need, like, right? And there's really not a whole lot of variety or creativity with what can be said. And to me, I've been very grateful for anyone and everyone who has just shared a kind word. Like, to me, it's like just one more person putting their arm around me and saying like, hey, like, you're loved. And it doesn't have to be a significant gesture, but even those little ones, even like my cousin messaged me like a night or two ago. So now we're several weeks after the fact. And even that, she's like, I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner. And it didn't even matter to me. It's just like, it was very pleasant just to see, I was going to say, hear a familiar voice, but to see a familiar name show up on my,
on my screen,
on my, my text notifications. And so that's been comforting, knowing that there's such a wide range of people who just take a moment to acknowledge what our experience has been like.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we've got no less than 40 cards in the mail. Mm-hmm. We've gotten 2 to 3 edible arrangements, a gift basket. We've gotten all kinds of plants delivered to the house. Like, no shortage of like love. And there's nothing that they can say, and there's nothing that they can do, but just the fact that someone is thinking about you during a time when they cannot help and is just trying to like let you know.
Right,
that
it all helps.
It all helps.
Yeah, it really does.
And what's interesting too is, of a lot of those people, some of them the same age or younger than us have lost a parent and knows what that's like. Sorry, tripping over my words a bit, but and you know, when they had a parent pass, and we sent a card, or, you know, had a gesture or just a hug, and we didn't think it meant anything. We thought it was like the least we could do. Mm-hmm. We understand that now. And it's also comforting to know that there are other people who understand what this is. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's just like an unspoken understanding. And to even know that other people in the world exist in that same state or that same understanding is helpful.
Well, that's what struck me too. Like, and there's some like morbid ways of looking at this, and so we'll go there, you know, delicately. But, you know, thinking about, we have 4 parents. My mom was 66 years old, and she really is what will likely be the first of 4 times that we'll need to navigate this. And that's a sad thought to have, but that's also the reality, and it makes us think, okay, like, what, going back to kind of the theme of the show, like recognizing that there is transient nature to these really significant relationships, whether it's our parents or siblings, aunts and uncles. Like, we recognize that there is an end at some point. So how does that change the way we want to look at the time that we do have? Yeah.
Right. What are we so caught up in, and what are we missing in that very small exchange of time that we have with others?
Yeah. All right, so we're getting to some of the like things of what we've learned, and I think that's the biggest one is living. I don't want to be thinking all the time about the fact that all these moments are temporary, but it is good to like decide how you want to act
in lieu of knowing what you know,
in light of that, and then let those actions become habits. I want to talk about grief briefly, because this is probably the first time I've grieved. You know, this is the first parent that I've lost. I've lost grandparents in the past, and but this was the most significant for me. And so what did I learn about grief itself? There's a quote that someone shared with me that I thought was, I couldn't find the source. It's like one of those internet memes.
Of course.
But someone said, grief is all the love you want to give but cannot. And it's like, love only works when it has a place to land. And grief is when you realize like there is, you're still giving that love, but it has that person that used to land on is no more.
Right. And not that it needs to be acknowledged or reciprocated, but that's kind of part of it. When you do love someone, it's like there's this, right, it goes to something.
Yeah.
It's processed.
Yeah. So that, and just like recognizing that this is kind of a persistent feeling. And some people have said like time helps in some ways, And other people have said that time really doesn't help. This is always a gap that it can never be replaced or refilled or healed. Or maybe if it heals, it's at least like a scar. And so just recognizing that too, like there are kind of these waves of understanding the loss. I was reading a little pamphlet before my mom passed, like about losing somebody you love, and it talked about, they called it like emotional bursts, where sometimes you'll be like perfectly fine, but then there's a thought or a trigger or something that then suddenly like causes almost like a small tidal wave of emotion just to well up, and then it passes as well. But just expecting that and leaning into those and don't fight it, but like that's the grief and the loss like welling up. And I have plenty of those moments, both certainly when we were in Texas, but also here as well.
Well, and I've heard it like this, is that you don't necessarily move on from grief. You learn to move on with grief. That you're always going to grieve the loss of your mother. She's always going to be with you. There's always going to be reminders of her. And so you move forward with it. You're not expected to like let go and just, it's over. It's never going to be over. It might hurt less and it might flood out less. But I think the loss will always be there,
And I'm already anticipating, the memorial. So as of recording, the memorial service is coming up. As if you're listening, the memorial service would have passed. But I'm looking forward to that. I'm thinking even about holidays as well, or like certain calendar dates, like my mom's birthday, or like September 10th every year. Like just like recognizing those are for sure going to be moments that her memory and her presence will be more poignant.
Yeah. I mean, for the kids right now, they're all responding differently. And even when we bring up her name, Juliet just can't handle it, like loses it. And so, it's going to be this ebb and flow of figuring out how to help them not move past it, but just understand it and channel that in a healthy way.
Yeah. So we also learned that everyone grieves in their own way. So I think you and I have just a certain way of processing and certain like preferences or needs related to that grief. But then I look at just like my sisters, both, or our kids, like they all seem to have a different set of needs or just way of reacting as well. And so I think that's appropriate to acknowledge where, if you are in a circumstance where there is a loss that's shared, you're sharing that loss with others close to you, everyone will kind of react somewhat differently. And just giving one another like the space and understanding to do that. It's nice when you're all on exactly the same page too.
We're going to grieve like this, and
This
we're
is how
going
it
to do it
goes.
this way.
Right.
Yeah.
But not everyone really has the same set of needs to respond to the grief that they're experiencing.
Right. It's hard for people to articulate it. It's hard for people to, some people want to be alone. Some people withdraw. Some people like lean into others. Mm-hmm. Part of my grief is, like as you're saying, the memorial for us is coming up this weekend. Part of my grief I've channeled into, we're doing like a celebration of life memorial for your mom. And, the event planner side of me is like, well, okay, we're doing this right. Like there will be nice linens on, like, I want to do her memory justice, just like we threw her a surprise 60th birthday a few years ago. Right. And I was like, I got this. Like, we're going to celebrate you.
People
like,
in your life who warrant it. Yeah.
I'm not, I'm never going to buy her another birthday present or a mother. Like, I took joy in doing those things for others to make them happy. And so like, this is my last hurrah for your mom. Mm-hmm. And so when people are like, oh, let me lighten the load, let me take off the burden, let me do it for you. And although I'm allowing people to help me, I also want to be in charge of this. Like it's for her, and that's how I'm going to channel some of that.
You can do for her,
yeah,
really. Yeah.
For her memory, right? All of her friends are going to come and see. Like we're gonna give them something to look at.
Yeah. So there's so much more to say and to explore. Obviously, we're not experts, but we're just on the ground level, kind of experiencing this for the first time and walking through some of this. But I think just over the weeks and the months ahead, it'll be, I just think we'll learn more, and then be able to look back in hindsight at our experience with more wisdom.
Yeah. I mean, we're doing this with our kids for the first time. and they're at a variety of ages. So what the explanation is for our 3-year-old is different than the explanation for our 11-year-old. What he understands and is processing is much greater, obviously, than our 6-year-old. They had a front row seat to the last few days with their grandmother. They saw they saw it
They
all.
woke up on Saturday morning and they're like, "Where's Nana?" I'm like, "Nana passed away last night."
Well, and so this was interesting for us. They went to sleep Friday night, the older two knowing, like, basically saying, like, she's not going to be here in the morning, is kind of like, just through our conversations and seeing what was happening. And they knew when they woke up that she wouldn't be there. But in some ways it was a good visual for them because she was there and she was sick. And I mean, thank the Lord that she went overnight and everything was like, and she was gone in the morning. And so they woke up to like, where is she? She's no longer here. Like, at least that kind of makes sense. She was here and she was sick. She passed away and now she's gone, right? Like, my 3-year-old comes in and says, "Morning, Mom. Is Nana still sick?" "No, Nana's not still sick." "Is Nana here?" "No, Nana's not here." "Well, where's Nana?" "She's in heaven." He looks at the bed. She's not there. She's in heaven. Okay. And he skipped. Like, that was enough for him.
3-year-olds, yeah.
Also, the 6-year-old kind of made sense. Like, she was here and now she's not. The other two are, there's a lot more to it for them. They understand it in a lot of different ways. They know where she is.
Yeah, try
now.
explaining cremation to your children. Yeah.
Yes, or why some people cremate and some people bury, and what's what's better and why. Like, so I mean, we've had so
many good questions,
hard conversations.
I should throw in here that we are sort of developing that. We haven't done this a lot, but we occasionally call a family meeting where we just sit around the table together, and there's usually an agenda as set by the parents, but kind of like an open discussion time. So we had one before we went to Texas. We had one since then as well, just to talk about our feelings and to do our best as parents to talk about how we're feeling, what our experiences have been, and then give our children the permission to ask questions or talk about how they're doing as well.
Well, and let our kids see our reactions. We called the family meeting. They're like, "Who's in trouble? What did we do?" Like, and then so we told them, "Well, we're going to talk about
what you did."
We're going to talk about Nana, Kristen, and how we're feeling. And it got real quiet. And Jordan started the meeting, and he uttered maybe a sentence or two. And was full out ugly crying. And even the kids just looked right at me for a reaction. First of all, it was, such an ugly cry that they didn't know if he was laughing or crying. It was
kind of weird to see your dad cry,
Correct. And then they all started crying. And so, but, as a family, like, if you cannot cry and show emotion in front of your family, right? The people who love you and are going to protect you forever, like, right? I think that just sets the stage for a lot of things. And so it was this very hard, super hard moment. But it was a very beautiful moment because we were gathered, we were honest about where we were and how we were feeling. And if it was bad, it was bad. And, I went at the end to kind of close and tried to kind of pick it back up. But, right, that was my job in that situation. Your job was to be raw and real, and mine was to kind of like help spin it. And so just like,
I don't think so. Like, I wouldn't think of your, like, as us having jobs in those moments. Like, it's just a family meeting. Like, it's just an open conversation. I don't want you to think like I have a role and I have to stick to that role or else.
Well, I think it was just, I think what I saw and what I wanted to share, like, ended up doing that. It wasn't like my intention. I thought I was going to be a hot mess, and it was just like, it felt good that, like, through that, like, I could channel something positive for them. And although it was hard, it was like, oh yeah, you're right. She did love us. She did meet us. She did see all of these great things. We did these things with her. So I thought it was good. But yeah, it was like a hard moment for our family, but we were all in, and we didn't really shelter them from really anything that weekend that was happening. We just tried to be honest and open. And maybe it was too much for them at times, but they get to see all of life. Yeah. I was talking with a friend. They said, "You've shown them all of life, that this is what we do when things get hard. This is what family means. And it's not always pretty and it's not always perfect. And that's okay to see that. It's even okay to be scared by it. But they'll remember that and they'll take that and they'll use that."
So there's a lot more to say. And I think, as I said, like, we'll continue to learn as we go. But, some of the main things are just being together. There's really no way to cope, except, like you said, like, just to go through. But I'm grateful to have you and our family to experience that with. And I think I'll just continue to work through how do we put words to our feelings or to our needs, and kind of live in light of that absence. So we may have maybe a follow-up at some point, maybe a year from now, to reflect with a little bit more perspective on what life has been like. But at least at this point, that's where we're at, and we certainly never wish this experience on anyone, but also recognizing the reality that, part of life is saying goodbye to those you love. And so it's best to talk through that and see to what extent we want to modify our habits and relationships in light of the fact that there is that imminent goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this obviously heavy conversation. And someone described losing a parent as joining a very depressing club, or now you have this unfortunate bond with other people. But I don't know where I was going with that.
Well,
yeah.
You know what?
But we appreciate you joining, us for this conversation. Hopefully that there's some thoughts and takeaways, or maybe if you have experienced this, some wisdom and love that you can share in our direction too.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. And like I said, maybe someone who's going through this, and this conversation could be helpful to them. And if you're going through it, just know that, there's nothing that we can say, but, we're with you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for joining us this week, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you're encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are two great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursuing what matters.